Somerville High School and the Somerville City Hall and our central campus. My name is Curtatone. I'm the mayor of the city of Somerville. I want to thank you for coming with us today, and also joining us, and there'll be Somerville School Committee, Ms. Carrie Norman, and the School Communications Chief, Ms. Susanna Fernandez. Here as part of our team also to answer questions, the Director of Health and Human Services, Mr. Doug Kress, the Somerville Public Schools Director of Equity and Excellence, Jessica Boston Davis, reopening consultant, Rebecca Granger, and the Somerville Family Learning Collaborative Family Liaison, Francia Reyes. The COVID-19 pandemic is not something anyone was prepared for. And nationally, we have failed miserably in leading. We've had no national testing plan. And in Massachusetts, we've been catching up. And we've all joined together to flatten out the curve. It has not been easy. We have successfully flattened the curve, but we paid a price. Our lives have been turned upside down. It's more than 144,000 people in this country to COVID-19. More than 8,000 in Massachusetts and 34 souls here in Somerville, Massachusetts. Not just with inconvenience, but with flood. And as we think about how we move forward as a community, as a commonwealth, as a society, we have to ensure that whatever we do, that we are certain that the health, well-being, and safety of every one of our residents is protected, and that any reopening, be it of any activity in our lives, our economy, or our schools, is sustainable. This has been difficult. We've now entered phase 3 in Massachusetts, although Somerville has not fully allowed all of phase 3 activities to open. In particular, those activities, indoor activities, such as gyms, fitness centers, entertainment venues, theaters, and like, that pose a high risk of transmission of the virus from person to person. We've paid too much to take unnecessary risks at this time. We've shown in Somerville that when we're decisive, deliberate, and bold and take action early, it has a positive impact. We could have lost more lives in Somerville. We certainly could have lost more in Massachusetts. We've come together to prevent that. More than 8,000 is certainly too much. But at a time when most of the rest of the country is on fire with COVID-19, parts of the Southeast and Southwest, and in California, where they were just 4 to 5 weeks ahead of us, and flattening out the curve and reopening parts of their economy and their lives, and now rolled back more than 30 counties last week. Now's the time for real vigilance. Now's the time to make sure we double down on all our efforts that are flattening out the curve if we're going to be able to open up schools safely and successfully. This is no easy task. This conversation today is focused on back-to-school planning for our pre-K to grade 12 students, as well as our adult learners who study at SCALE, which is the Somerville Center for Adult Learning Experiences. Obviously, there are other school issues around colleges coming back, and we are working closely with our partners at Tufts University on that. But today we're focused on the Somerville Public Schools. We know parents are in an untenable situation of waiting to know what to expect this fall. Believe me, I know. My wife and I have 4 children. We have children in the Somerville Public Schools, and we want desperately to get them back into a school setting. But we're here to provide an update on our progress and a window into our process and our approach. Through the Department of Early and Secondary Education, DESE, the state has issued guidelines that form a good starting point, but that fall short of our needs. They don't take into account the uniqueness of each environment, of each community, of each school district. In some cases, they actually set the safety bar too low, and they don't come with sufficient federal or state funding to keep our kids safe and moving forward in a sustainable way for any reopening. So we're doing what Somerville does and has done, phases 1, 2, and now 3. We're going to move diligently and deliberately. We're working with experts, studying the best guidance, data, and science, searching for the best solutions, setting our standards high, and ensuring that our plans meet the needs of our most vulnerable students and families. Let's not forget that not only has COVID-19 been unforgiving, it's been extremely harsh on our most vulnerable members of our community: Black, brown people, immigrants, the elderly. These are not acceptable losses in any society. Especially during the pandemic, it's important to remember that those disproportionate impacts and disparate outcomes, again, have been extremely harsh for those members of our community. So in short, we are working diligently to ensure that despite this god-awful pandemic, that all of our students have every possible opportunity to learn, grow, and progress, while we continue to strive to keep the curve flat for our entire community. Again, I'll be honest, be clear, and to no surprise, there's no easy solution here. We've been talking to families and staff, looking at needs from safe transportation to air filtration, and reviewing needed protocols from proactive testing policies to face covering requirements. Again, our guiding value here is protecting the health of our students, their families, our teachers, the school staff, and our broader community, while ensuring our students continue to learn and that their education and personal development remains on track. With that, I'd like to introduce the Superintendent of the Somerville Public Schools, Mary Skipper, who will talk in more detail about the district's process and plans today.
Good morning. So, pandemic being something that impacts all people, certainly here in Somerville, that has been our case, relative to our students, to our staff, and their families. It's had great impact on so many levels. And we strive to find and continue to find the best solutions for our whole community. In times of crisis, it's important to make sure that you're falling back on your values. One main value that our mayor reiterated is that of safety. And in this case, it's safety for a very sacred bond that exists in the school community between a student, between a parent, and between an educator. And so really, we need to be able to ensure that safety for all those levels in order for folks to return to school and be able to get back to business as usual. We also look through a lens of equity in everything we do here in Somerville. And we know from the emergency closure and the reliance on just remote learning that had a disparate impact on some of our community in ways that it did not have on others. We know, for instance, our newcomer English language learners, particularly those in their first and second year of learning English, our special education students who may have been in programming for autism or for social emotional needs, or for learning needs, or medically fragile. For our youngest students, our pre-K, third grade, for them, remote learning did not work in the ways it needed to give them access. And beyond that, you had families who had impact of food insecurity, housing insecurity, not being connected to the internet. All things that became stumbling blocks to them fully being able to access their education. And that is and should continue to be our goal. And then finally, here, our values are around our process. And that is a healthy one. It's an importance of making sure it's inclusive and that it's transparent, so that all of our solutions and our challenges are shared openly, and that we can collaboratively come up with what some of those solutions are. And so, as we think to the process and use those values in laying it out, and so really from June to July, we've been working as a community to plan for what the reopening could look like. And frankly, that reopening is one that none of us, none of you, none of us, will have ever gone through before in a pandemic. Here in Somerville, it is always about working together. And so making sure that the stakeholders, parents, students, staff, community members have a voice in the process has been pivotal for us. There are key groups that we have formed. Our City District Reopening Task Force, where our city and district folks work together across a myriad of issues. Our Environmental Health and Safety Workforce, which is really looking at things like buildings and sanitizing and health programs. Our grade span teams, which is where educators can use their voice to talk about curriculum, teaching, and learning. And our school-based reopening teams, which will allow an opportunity for parents, students, and our staff at the local school level to be involved. These have all been critical vehicles for voice. And one very unique one, which has been with the district management group. This is a group that's based out of Harvard Business School, and we've had the good fortune of working with them alongside Cambridge and alongside Salem in a way of looking at what our common challenges are, what our common solutions can be, and peer reviewing our plans as they get created. As the mayor said, DESE has put out some guidelines, and they're just that, they're guidelines. We recognize here in Somerville that for us, with a density and with a population of people of color and immigrants who have had disproportionate impact to them, that it is important for us not to accept base guidelines, but to go above those guidelines. And so in our planning, things like 6 feet social distance as opposed to a minimum of 3 feet became our norm. Things like wearing masks for our pre-K students all the way up to 12th grade has become our norm. Recognizing that we need PPE and in volume to ensure that staff can return to classrooms and feel safe in doing so. An assessment of all buildings for ventilation, filtration, and other kinds of issues. Looking at new furniture that enables us to use space differently so that that 6-foot social distance can happen. And that space may include outside space as well. These are all things that we're committed to and feel are part of a comprehensive plan. And although we're still actively planning and making our decisions, one thing you should know is that it's clear from our work that one thing we are taking off the table is a return in the fall full-time for all students to come. We've looked at it and do not believe it's safe. We believe that at this point, us investing in our hybrid models and investing in our remote models is what is going to be most helpful for our community. And in doing so is a reliance of those two models together, hybrid and remote, because if COVID ends up in a classroom and students need to be quarantined for 2 weeks, or if it's in a school and the school has to be shuttered, students are going to have to go back and forth between hybrid in person and being fully remote. So it's really on us and our onus as a district to make sure both of those systems can support all of our students and staff. We will continue to work toward the challenges, of which there are many, and we will continue to seek out voice. Last night we held a multilingual in 4 different languages parent forum, and from that we received well over 100 responses from parents of what they're thinking relative to the pandemic and the return to school. And we've done extensive surveying, and we will continue to look for those types of vehicles to get parent, student, and staff voice. Long term, we all want to be able to welcome back all of our students in person at some time in the future when it's safe. But the virus and the data will be the things that we will have to make those decisions on. Finally, I just want to say personally, I've been in education 32 years. I've opened a school from scratch, and I've redesigned a family school. And I can say without doubt that this process of moving a system to be pandemic-proof has by far been the most challenging process. It's challenging because there are a lot of uncertainties, the virus being the greatest. It is challenging because it is about complexity. This isn't just about ordering materials and putting new furniture in classrooms. It's about changing human behavior. And that is one of the hardest things to do in education. Students and staff have an image of what schooling is. And when they return, that image will not be the same. How students can interact with each other, having to keep a 6-foot distance, not being able to share their materials, having particular ways that they have to move throughout the building to create that distance, wearing masks all day. These are things that a year ago were nowhere on site, and now they're part of our everyday life and fabric. So that will be altering for our students and staff. It will take time for them to get used to it. There will be mistakes, and we will have to make a commitment to try. And then finally, I just think the other complexity is that we're redesigning systems on the fly, and there's danger to them. Things like transportation, food services, sanitation processes, these are all systems that often are years in building. And in a very short time, basically from June on, districts are being expected to change and redesign those systems in a way that work in a pandemic. So I think we need to be cautious about that. We need to offer each other a lot of eyes on that to make sure we're making the best decisions possible. And we need to be open to improving the process as it goes forward. So with that, I'd just like to thank everyone. I can't say enough for our parents and our staff and our community here for all that they share and their openness. I think flexibility, being nimble, and really being collaborative with one another in the fall is going to be the key to our success in summer. So thank you very much.
This time I introduce the chairwoman of the Somerville School Committee, Ms. Carrie Nolan.
Hi, I'm chair of the school committee and also a parent. This hits very close to home for all of us. The mayor and the superintendent talked about the national, state, district-wide. I'm here to talk to you about the individuals, because that's really what's driving this. In summer, we talk about educating and caring for the whole child and equity. Those are the values that we will continue to come back to as we make decisions moving forward. We need to look into the care for our students. We have a wildly diverse and complex student population, and we'll be looking at the needs, the individual needs, whether it's in special programming, the ages of kids, how do you bring them back? It will not look the same for every student at every point, and yet our driving values for each one will always be informing those decisions. Questions of safety will always come first for the students, but we also understand that so much of education is the relationships between students and teachers and how to best do that in the safest way possible as we go forward. We're also taking into consideration the needs of our families. A lot of outreach to many different forums. The superintendent referenced the multilingual town forums. Last night we'll be doing more. Our families, some of them are working from home and have kids. Some of them are essential workers and can't stay home with their kids if they're at home. We've got teachers who teach in one district and have their own children in another district. And there's no coordination. We're working on it between different districts. So these are all very real variables of what our families and our educators are going through with our students. And so we talk about systems and how to do that as safely as possible, but it is always through the lens of individuals. If a family or an instructor has an elderly parent, an underlying medical condition, these are all things that we can make decisions across the board, but we have to take into consideration the needs of each and every member of our families. And so we're devising plans, the superintendent referenced hybrid and the remote, with as much flexibility both to respond to the virus, but also to respond to individual needs of our community as we go forward in this very complex time. I will say it is challenging, it is unprecedented, and there have been moments again and again in Somerville where I've been so touched. We have come together.
Now let me introduce the Somerville Public Schools Communications Chief, Ms. Susanna Hernandez.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for being here this morning. I just want to touch, I'll be very brief, but just want to provide a little bit of context around our thinking related to family engagement. The superintendent touched earlier on how important having a transparent process is, and we're working really hard to make sure that we keep families informed and engaged in this process. Getting input and feedback throughout the process from families and staff members, be it through surveys, committee meetings, community forums, or through personal outreach, will continue to be an important part of this planning process. We also serve a wonderfully diverse community of learners, and ensuring that their voices are reflected in all of our communications and engagement efforts is very important and will continue to do that regardless of the method that we use to communicate and engage our families. Through the Somerville Family Learning Collaborative, which is our family engagement department, we coordinate additional multilingual direct outreach to families whose first language may not be English, and to our more vulnerable families. Our team of family and community liaisons play a really central role in providing that type of support. And their work really depends on the needs of the specific school community that they're working with. They may help ensure families are connected to services and supports that they may need. And again, their work will evolve as the needs of the community evolve. Some of the things that they may be doing is they may assist families in getting connected to the internet. They can help them find resources for basic needs, providing interpretation to ensure that families are able to access the information that they need at that particular time, and a variety of other supports. As we continue our planning work, we will also continue to do everything we can to keep our families and staff informed and engaged throughout the process. As a reminder, the City and School District will be hosting 4 community town halls over the next 2 weeks. They will take place on Wednesday, July 29th, and the following Wednesday, August 6th. We will have a multilingual town hall from 5 to 6:45 p.m. each evening, followed by a town hall in English. I'd like to introduce one of our family and community liaisons, Francia Reyes, who's going to make some very brief comments. Francia?
We know that it has been very painful and challenging for families. As SFLC, a basic liaison and part of the Somerville Public Schools, we have worked in collaboration with the city. We provide families access to technology like free computers, internet access, food, housing, and other basic support that we mentioned before. We have hundreds of conversations with families every day. Liaison and teachers are connecting all the families, and in those conversations, they have shared the deep struggle they are facing, and we continue to learn and be amazed about family strength and resilience. We are going to try to provide all the possible and necessary support for students and for the families, and also for our teachers and our staff, to help everybody stay safe during this trying time. I'm going to say something in Spanish for families. Nosotros sabemos, las escuelas de Somerville y la ciudad, que necesitamos mucha ayuda. Nosotros vamos a continuar trabajando con la misma pasión y compasión para proveer a todas las familias todo lo que sea necesario para continuar participando en las escuelas y para mantener a todos a salvo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Francia. Now I know you probably have some questions. The question is, do we know what the hybrid model might look like? I'm going to defer to the superintendent, but let me state, once we're out of the possibility, I think that anybody with the least common sense knows in the most densely populated city in Massachusetts, and almost every community here, almost impossible to have everybody back safely all together. So everything we do from there on out is some sort of hybrid model. I'm going to let the superintendent answer that specifically.
Morning. Right now, we're looking at 2 different types of hybrids. One would be a week-on, week-off, and one is what we call a cohort A, cohort B, where students would come, say, on Monday, Tuesday, and then everyone would be full remote on Wednesday, and then kids would come on Thursday, Friday. Based on our data, initially, I would say that there's more of a preference for the second model, which would be to see the students every week for at least 2 days. That also allows us a deep cleaning of the buildings on Wednesdays, and it allows teachers what I believe is very necessary time for them to plan. This is a very different instructional model that they're being asked to do and to deliver. And so to build that time in is going to be essential. So if they're teaching all week, well, they don't have that time to plan. So at this point, we like that model, but we want to get more input from the community for making that final decision.
Superintendent, sorry to interrupt there. I couldn't hear construction. Were you saying that you were considering having masks for all students pre-K and up?
Correct.
Okay. And
The exception to that would be there are students who have a medical reason or who have a sensory reason linked to their disability, but they may not be able to wear a mask. And so obviously we'll make those accommodations. But yes, our plan is to have students pay up to be able to wear a mask.
the current guidance you say was it second grade and up?
Correct. Second grade and up, although the state does say that they encourage pay only.
Mayor, I guess I'd ask you about that. I think that's going to grab some headlines. Why are we thinking starting that yet?
I'd submit, well, the argument is simple. We need to take every step necessary to mitigate any risk of transmission of the virus from person to person. Loose guidance, we should have learned this from the beginning of this pandemic. It wasn't until cities, school districts like Somerville led the charge to close school districts when the governor of the state was reticent, institute mandatory mask orders. We did that in Somerville when other communities didn't. There was guidance or stay-at-home advisories. Because at the beginning, what was happening, we had 351 different variations of what you should do. And that we cannot have. And at a time when we flatten out the curve, we know, let's be clear, the virus is going to be with us. People are going to continue to become ill. They are now. People are going to continue to die. They're dying right now. We cannot afford a resurgence that is as bad or worse than the original surge. It was happening. Every expert tells us it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The question will be, how bad would that resurgence be? And the steps we do right now today in every activity, including phase 3, will determine that. What we do matters. So we're going to take every step. We're going to be conservative, and these are easily decided matters. They're informed by expertise, by data, and by decisions. I do want to add 2 other important points as we think about what a hybrid or what it looks like. This is an enormous task for any community or school district. We have our educational goals that either model must move forward or help achieve. Then we have operational requirements of the buildings that we have to implement in order to facilitate those educational goals. So, I'm standing before a structure that was built in 1895. If you haven't noticed, we're in a construction zone. This building will not be, the new school, because of COVID and delays, will not be fully completed until mid-November. These are the type of issues we have to deal with. We have 6 of our 9 school buildings that have been either completely built new or renovated in the last 25 years. But not every building is at the same standard. And this example, or this matter, this plays in every community. So beyond that, we have our health and safety goals, are the overarching goals for the whole community. Whatever we do must be reconciled and consistent with those goals. That includes testing. Testing is going backwards in Massachusetts. Supply issues and constraints are coming back. We are running out of resurgence. We have minimal amount of swabs. And that's because, understandably, nationally we're diverting supplies to Florida, Arizona, and other in Texas, and it makes a lot of sense. So we need to, in order to sustain and reopen, have to be able to surveillance test as well. We need to understand, not just in Somerville and the Somerville Public Schools, but in the region, the Commonwealth, how the pandemic is evolving, how the resurgence is attacking us, or else we cannot isolate and contain it. So there's a lot that's going into this. Now, we're one community. We're not fooling ourselves that we can put a firewall around Somerville. But we've shown through our efforts at the beginning that we can have an impact on our local transmission rates, and they're one of the lowest, if not the lowest in the state. But a resurgence can overwhelm us all. And we know that small numbers at the beginning can flash to bigger numbers quickly. And that's why we're taking all the necessary steps that are conservative, that are decisive, and that are bold. Yes?
I have a question about after-school programs and athletics. Has the future of that been decided yet, or has there been a model put in place for those activities to kind of move forward slowly?
I will hand that over to the superintendent. I'll give you what I know. So the question is about after-school activities and athletics. Has the future been decided? And the other part was?
If not, has there been a model put in place?
So there's no model that's been put in place. All we know about athletics now in Massachusetts is you can have certain games in certain sports. there's some sports they categorize them into low, moderate, and high-risk sports activities. This would carry over for any youth sport, scholastic sports. The MIAA, which is the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, the governing body for scholastic sports, has announced that all activities for fall sports, that means the time, by the way, for full disclosure, I was a high school football coach for almost 30 years and a girls softball coach for many years also. It's a passion of mine. You would start your activities in August to prepare for your fall sports. They've delayed those activities, those practices, those workouts until September, but the decision of whether or not fall sports would happen as we think of them traditionally, football, soccer, cross country, that has not come yet. And I'll defer to the superintendent. Do you have anything to add on that?
Nothing to add relative to the sports, but I do think in terms of the after-school programming, we are currently during the summer running some pilot camps with our after-school and main after-school program community schools, and we did this deliberately to be able to see what would be the kinds of issues that we would run into. Fortunately, we have been able to run them pretty successfully by keeping kids in small pods or cohorts with a large amount of adults to students. To give you a sense, in a given school year, somewhere around 750 to 1,000 students sign up for our after-school program. So this would be scaling that tremendously. We see our reopening in phases, so this would need to be part of one of the earlier phases, but I'm not sure it would be the first thing that we would do out of the gate. Much will depend on how we end the pilots, what we learn from them, and what we feel comfortable being able to bring back in for which students. This may be an example where, since we want to really prioritize the students who are not able to access remote earlier, pre-K to 2, that might be an age that we want to prioritize the after-school program to make that.
I know in surrounding communities right now, we're seeing teachers positive. Have you guys discussed or had a general consensus of how you guys would approach that issue and not just as you guys
We do. We have a wonderful health commission director, Doug Kress, who I'm sure would take that question as well. But part of the value of having the environmental and safety protocol committee is to lay out just that. That the teacher's diagnosed, the student is diagnosed, and then to ensure on our side that we're trying to mitigate that. And that, I think, is one of the values of hybrid method, where you're really taking the kids and putting them in very small groups, and teachers are traveling, not students. So you're really limiting the amount of contact students are having outside of their small pod or their small group. Much easier to contact trace, and just much less chance of that widespread within a building. So, but I don't know if Dr. Kress wants to answer anything else?
Great, thank you for that question. I think it's an important one to think about as we move forward. This is just one step, and obviously the process we have to look at, not just about testing individuals, but also our contact tracing. We have a great team, public health and school nurses who work together to do that contact tracing and continue to move that forward. And we are putting a process together for whenever we do have a positive case, how we will handle that, following the protocols that we put in place prior about going forward with not just looking at cohorts and how students are going to be working together and looking at that so we can minimize that impact whenever there is an individual who does test positive. But again, the idea around that is prevention. We need to continue that prevention. That's why we're wearing masks. That's why we're looking at doing our social distancing. And that just cannot happen in our schools. This has to happen throughout our entire community so that we continue to have that prevention efforts in there so we don't spread that virus. We need to slow and stop the spread of the virus.
Would there be any sort of screening process before students arrive?
We are still looking into that process of how we're going to be able to do some of that work and move that forward in a way. I think the mayor already expressed some of the challenges that we are facing here in the New England area about limited availability of some of the supplies that we have due to the outbreak that's been happening in other parts of the country and having to divert some of our supplies. But we are definitely looking at how we are able to work that together with the community, with the teachers, with our city, and to make that happen. I think the mayor wants to add a couple of comments as well.
I can also, again, let me restate, clarify, part of our reopening plan would include a framework and approach for surveillance testing. With surveillance testing, ideally, you want everyone to come in with a baseline. You want to know where everybody stands. Surveillance testing would also involve taking a certain percentage of your population, in this case your school population, teachers, staff, and students, and at random, on a scheduled basis, and testing to have a better understanding of what's happening in that population, in that community. Dr. Kress also mentioned contact tracing. This is critical also, because that is going to be huge for us to inform people and stay ahead of any resurgence. Our concern also is phase 3, some of these activities in phase 3 reopening and contributing to our challenge to open schools. The Commonwealth is scaled back in contact tracing. The comment we heard, and I understand it's a challenge for the government, that we can hire people back when things change. But when things change in the ground, it's much like at the beginning. Once you see it in the ground, it's too late. You have community spread. Things start changing rapidly. And if a resurgence moves rapidly and we're not ahead of it, we're going to be overwhelmed. So we will have a framework that supports our opening of ground testing, contact tracing. The caveat is supply will depend on how successful we are. There's a grave concern right now, speaking to our local healthcare partner, the Cambridge Health Alliance, which is our regional hospital and healthcare safety net. Many communities in this region, in Uniport, supplies of reagent. You know, it's on a it's almost on a weekly basis. It's like a little weekly paycheck.
You mentioned just the testing potentially considering doing it. Would that be, if a teacher were randomly selected for this testing, would they have an option of opting out of that?
So we have the question is, would anyone have an option out of that? We haven't developed the full testing approach. There's some things we're going to mandate. We haven't developed that. We are working closely with our partner that will be involved in the testing, the Cambridge Health Alliance. That plan will be presented to the Board of Health. Will have to make a decision on that, a declaration. We'll work with the school community. Anything we do, however, that impacts the working condition of any union employee will have to be bargained at the table. That may have to come to that. However, you know, I want to just emphasize that we're going to have to do some things and continue to do things as a society that are not convenient or comfortable to us, like wearing a face cover, or making sure we all get a flu shot so it doesn't compound our situation worse, or cloud what we're seeing within our populations come September, October, November, and into the winter, or more frequent testing, if we're going to stay ahead of it. Vaccine isn't coming tomorrow, and notwithstanding any vaccine, we're still going to have COVID with us. And I remind people our goal here is to avoid people getting sick and saving lives. We can take one more question.
Do you have an estimated start date yet? I know the calendar still said September 2nd. I know that was in a pre-COVID world. I wasn't sure if that was still the case.
I will hand this off to the superintendent.
So we're waiting for some additional guidance from the Department of Ed relative to the 180-day requirement and whether or not there's going to be some flexibility in that. If there were, then that might allow us to be able to use some of that time, I think, in early calendar to get teachers back and give them the appropriate amount of time that they need the staff to come together, look at their rooms, be able to be trained in the new protocols, work together relative to setting up grade structures for remote learning, really do some of the basics. So they will need some time to do that. So our hope is that in the field that the Department of Ed understands we need that flexibility, and if it's given, then we would likely look to the calendar and make some alterations.
So we close, and let me just state that as we know and make decisions, we're not waiting till August 10th. We're going to let the public know what we know as soon as possible. You know, the governor has asked communities not to talk about August 10th. We do not accept that. That is not reasonable. Parents, teachers, staff, students want to know. They want to know what we're thinking. They want to know what decisions we've already made, what went into those decisions, and they want to know what we can't answer. There's much we cannot answer today. So it's important in any crisis, and we're brutally honest, up front, share the data and information that informs our decision, and lead with that, because we need everybody. When we say we're all in it together, that means we share what we know together on a real-time basis, because we need the public's trust and cooperation with that. I thank everyone in our community across the Commonwealth who stepped up, sacrificed so much to help us flatten out the curve, and remind everyone we have a long way to go. Let's continue to work together and keep each other safe. Thank you very much.